Let's talk about how the world of independent film has changed so much. I remember when you first started New World Pictures, you called it New World Pictures because you didn't know if it was going to be film, video, or what. It seemed like you could get a handheld camera and a small crew and run out and make a movie and get it in theaters. It's changed so much over the decades since then.
You have just hit the most important and damaging change in motion pictures for the independent. You're right. The first picture I made, which I called It Stalked the Ocean Floor for $30,000, but the distributor gave me an advance against profits of $60,000. He thought It Stalked the Ocean Floor was too arty a title, and he called it Monster from the Ocean Floor.
There you go.
Right. He could be right because the picture did fairly well. But that $30,000 picture played theatrically all over the United States. And in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and up until the 90s, just about any reasonably decent independent picture could get a full theatrical release. Today, the majors and these giant 100, 200, Avatar, $300 million films are dominating theatrical, which has pushed the independent filmmaker, particularly the medium and low budget filmmaker, out of theaters with an occasional exception. But in general, we are confined to television, cable, DVDs, and other new, hopefully the internet.
Well, you've even just made a deal with Netflix and doing a series of short films with Joe Dante.
Actually, it was Netflix's idea. I took the assignment only because of the challenge. And that's the reason Joe came back, because Joe's making big films. When he heard what we were doing, he called me and he said, Roger, this is the way we all started, except more so, I want to come back and direct. What it is this. These are what they call webisodes, about 10-minute episodes which play on the internet. And on Halloween night, we set up this thing with Johnny Splatter, a rock star, presumably dead, and people gather for the reading of his will, needless to say, in an old dark house. Now, a number of people die horrifically. It's a horror show. When they asked me to do that, I said, I've done that 50 times. There's no problem with this. But here's where the challenge comes. They said, we want another 10-minute show on the air exactly 1 week later, and we will poll our viewers, and they will tell you who they want killed in the next episode. It takes them a day to get the results of who they want killed, which means we have 6 days to write, produce, edit, have post-production, and have the show on the air. And then the viewers vote again until there's only one person left. And I thought, this is great. I don't think this has ever been done before. At my age, I'm doing something new. And I took it just for that because of the challenge and the fun of doing something like that.
And so it really was a new shooting experience each week. You didn't shoot all of the potential endings at once. You really did just shoot the one choice each week.
We did something close to that. We started off saying, okay, we'll shoot the first one. I think we shot the first one in 4 or 5 days. And then we'll shoot as we go along. And then we thought, and this was my wife's idea, who co-produced it with me, she said, to ease the shooting later on, why don't we shoot the death of everybody in advance, and then we'll simply throw away the death of the person who's voted to live. That way we have less shooting to do. We just have plot points and setup shots in the second and third week. That actually was a key to the fact that we were able to do it.
Let's talk about the importance of titles. Over the years, there have been titles that have come first, and the movies have been wrapped around them. Tell me about some of those. How does the title, The Beast with a Million Eyes, become the actual movie into the theater?
I was working with AIP at that time, and Jim Nicholson, who was the head of AIP, had been a former theater owner who played a lot of independent films, and he knew a lot about what had worked and what hadn't worked. And he and I worked together on a number of the films. He, of course, I made the films, but he was the executive at the studio. And we jointly came up with that. The Beast with Five Fingers or something had come out, and we thought it was always interesting to have a title that was somewhat reminiscent of a big success, but it should be an original title. So that's where The Beast with a Million Eyes came from. I remember another title, when the first Russian Sputnik went up, I called Steve Broidy, the head of Allied Artists, and said, I've got a picture about satellites that you can have in theaters in 90 days if you will back me. He said, what do you want to make? I said, I've got a title, War of the Satellites. I don't know what the picture will be, but if you will approve the picture now, just with that title, and I want $70,000 to make the picture, and I'll take a little fee and we'll divide the profits, you can have in 90 days the first satellite picture in the world. And he said, I'll do it. And he took it just on the title.
So the title and you.
Yes, it was. He knew I had been able to deliver on a low budget and fast schedule before.
Let's define the word exploitation, because I think it's been misused a lot in terms of movies. To exploit something is to have material that is saleable.
Yes, a lot of people shy away from the word exploitation. They think there's something wrong with it. Every film, when it's distributed, is exploited. Sometimes it's exploited in a very dignified manner, sometimes exploited in a very wild manner. So the use of the word exploitation doesn't bother me at all. It simply means finding something in the subject matter that is of interest unto itself, that will draw the audience in, irrespective of the budget or the name value. I could almost say you're not even counting the quality of the film, but I don't like that. I always feel whatever the budget, you have to do your best job.
Well, even an art house movie is exploiting an art house audience.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we distributed a number of art films, and we distributed Ingmar Bergman's Cries and Whispers, in which a woman was comforted against another woman, in which you could see almost a bare breast. We used that as the ad. Nobody complained because it was Ingmar Bergman.
Right.
If it had been just some little crime story or something, probably somebody would have said, you know, that's you can't use that picture.
Trash.
That trash, yeah. Indeed.
Well, let's go back to the genre, particularly the horror genre, because your company and you as a producer and as a director came back to that often.
Yes, and I think there are reasons for that. It's psychological. I think it is buried in our unconscious minds. We're alone at the age of 2 or 3 or whatever in bed, and we hear the thunder and lightning, and we're afraid. Also, in some cases, we believe there's a monster under the bed, and the parents come in and lift the bedding and say, look, there's no monster there. But we know the monster has ducked away when the parents come into the room. Now, that stays with us. This, at least, is my theory of horror. I think that all those childhood fears lie buried in our unconscious mind. As we grow older, we realize there's nothing to worry about thunder and lightning. There is no monster under the bed. Our conscious mind knows that. The unconscious mind does not know that. So it is the job of the filmmaker to break through the barrier of the conscious mind and strike that fear in the unconscious mind. That's what I've always tried to do. I built everything working all different ways, but always with that intent to break through the conscious mind.
And specifically, how do you approach that? For example, in the Poe pictures.
All right. I think you start by setting up the atmosphere of fear. You can't have something happen totally out of the blue. You'll get a little bit of a shock, but it's better if you build up. I can give you one example. On one of the pictures, I used Ray Milland because Vincent Price wasn't available. I had a shot where Ray was walking down a dark corridor at night. It's always dark, it's always night. There was thunder and lightning, there's always thunder and lightning, and I think there were cobwebs, the various accoutrements. And he knew behind the door at the end of the corridor was information that he must have. And he suspected that it was something really frightening. So by cutting to his face and moving back with him and then reversing the camera and going with the point of view, which were always to me the two key shots, plus an establishing shot, a couple of others, but those two traveling shots, and with the music, and with the thunder hitting and everything and the lightning flash, I build up a sense of suspense and fear, trying to have the audience torn, with the audience, half the people saying, go forward and find out what is behind that door. The other half are saying, get out of that house right away. Forget it. Do not open that door.
And they're the most vocal ones on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yes. Now, of course, he has to open the door. I mean, there's no scene if he doesn't open the door. What I did, I've forgotten the plot point, but there was something about a rocking horse that he had when he was a little child. And I built up on a ladder as if it was propped against the door, the rocking horse. And as he opened the door, the rocking horse fell straight forward into the camera, and I zoomed in exactly into the rocking horse. At the same time, the suspense music built like that. The audience screamed. I can't tell you how happy I was to hear the audience scream. Now, I had done it entirely without cutting off anybody's arm or shooting blood across the screen or anything like that. It was all psychological. And it was with the concept of building this sense of fear and then breaking through to the unconscious childhood fear.
Do you take a little bit of sadistic glee sitting in that theater on Hollywood Boulevard full of patrons when you're building up and you know you're scaring the shit out of them, and that release happens and they all shout and throw their popcorn?
There may well be some sadistic satisfaction, but there is also the satisfaction of knowing that I've done it right. I've done it wrong a number of times, but I like to remember the times like that where I've done it right, I've set the scene up, and it worked. And I take pleasure from that.